If I ask you a simple question, are you happy? Your mind will probably rush to answer before your body does. Pause for a moment. Feel your breath. Because here is the quiet paradox most people never question. The harder you chase happiness, the more miserable you become. I learned this the slow way. I believed happiness was waiting somewhere ahead of me, just beyond the next achievement, the next upgrade, the next version of myself. I kept moving, faster, louder, more desperate. I collected moments of pleasure like trophies, convincing myself they meant something permanent. Yet at the end of each sprint, there was the same hollow feeling, exhaustion, mixed with disappointment. The Stoics would not call this bad luck. They would call it confusion. A confusion between what is stable and what is fleeting. Between what we can control and what forever slips through our fingers. Happiness, they warned, is not something to hunt. The moment you make it your target, you place your peace in the hands of chance. You begin shaping your life around feelings instead of principles. You choose work because it promises excitement, not meaning. You choose people because they make you feel good now, not because they are good. And when those feelings fade, as they always do, you assume something is wrong with you or with life itself. I recognize this trap because I lived inside it. Late nights scrolling, searching for proof that I was enjoying life correctly. Mornings waking up with an invisible demand to feel better than yesterday. The pressure to be happy became its own form of suffering. I compared myself endlessly. Others looked calmer, more fulfilled, more complete, and comparison, as the Stoics warned, quietly stole my tranquility. When your mind lives in the future, where happiness is promised, the present becomes unbearable. You stop inhabiting your own life and start evaluating it. In doing so, you lose the only thing that was ever real. This moment, exactly as it is. Now, slow down with me. The Stoics were not enemies of joy. They simply refused to depend on it. Instead of chasing happiness, they cultivated something deeper and more resilient. Inner steadiness. They believed the good life was not about feeling pleasant emotions as often as possible, but about living in accordance with reason, character, and virtue. Not more excitement, but more alignment. Not avoiding pain at all costs, but meeting it with dignity. When you stop chasing happiness, something unexpected happens. You regain control. Your attention returns to what is actually yours. Your judgments, your actions, your values. You no longer ask, does this make me happy right now? You ask, is this the right thing to do? And that single shift changes everything. The Stoics understood that a person who acts with integrity, even in difficulty, sleeps more peacefully than someone constantly chasing pleasure. Think of a person who keeps their word when it costs them. Someone who remains calm under pressure, who does not collapse when circumstances turn against them. They are not cheerful every day. They do not float through life untouched by pain, but they are grounded. And that quiet groundedness, stable, unshaken, is what many people mistake for happiness. It does not arrive in bursts. It settles in slowly. This path is not easy. It demands discipline in a world addicted to stimulation. It requires the courage to let go of outcomes and embrace effort instead. But the reward is rare and profound. Inner silence. And from that silence, joy emerges naturally, unforced, unannounced, like morning light, entering a room that was never chasing it. There was a time when I believed happiness was something I could engineer. If I arranged my life correctly, right habits, right people, right outcomes, then contentment would arrive and stay. I treated happiness like a fragile object, something that needed constant adjustment and protection. When it slipped away, I blamed circumstances. When it returned briefly, I clung to it with quiet fear. The Stoics would say I had made a common mistake. I had tied my inner state to external conditions. Epictetus warned that the moment you depend on what is not yours, you become a slave. I did not understand this at first. I thought freedom meant having more choices, more pleasures, more comfort, but slowly, painfully, I began to see the truth. Every time my happiness depended on success, I feared failure. Every time it depended on praise, I feared silence. Every time it depended on being loved, I feared loss. What I called happiness was fragile because it was built on things that could be taken away. I remember one particular morning. Nothing dramatic happened. No tragedy, no crisis. Just a quiet realization as I sat alone, feeling strangely empty despite having everything I once wanted. That emptiness was not sadness. It was clarity. I saw how much energy I had spent trying to feel a certain way instead of learning how to be a certain kind of person. The Stoics understood this distinction deeply. They did not ask, "How can I be happy?" They asked, "How should I live?" When happiness becomes the goal, life turns into a performance. You monitor your emotions constantly. You ask yourself whether you are enjoying things enough. You pressure yourself to feel gratitude, excitement, fulfillment, on demand. And when those emotions do not appear, you feel defective. But emotions do not obey commands. They respond to conditions. The Stoics chose to work on the only conditions fully within reach: their judgments, their actions, their character. They accepted discomfort as part of being alive. They understood that pain is not the enemy. Avoidance is. By trying to eliminate all discomfort, we create a new form of suffering: anxiety. Anxiety about losing what we enjoy. Anxiety about not enjoying what we have. In chasing happiness, we become tense, watchful, restless. We stop living and start managing our emotional image. Stoicism offers a quieter alternative. It does not promise constant happiness. It offers stability. It teaches you how to stand firmly when pleasure leaves and pain arrives. This is not pessimism. It is realism. Marcus Aurelius wrote not to escape hardship, but to meet it with clarity. He reminded himself daily that obstacles, insults, losses, and delays were not interruptions of life. They were life. When you stop demanding happiness from every moment, you allow moments to be what they are. Some are light, some are heavy. None need to be rejected. The Stoics practiced voluntary discomfort not because they hated pleasure, but because they refused to depend on it. By training themselves to endure less, they gained more freedom. Freedom from fear, freedom from desperation, freedom from the endless internal question, "Am I happy enough yet?" I noticed a change when I adopted this mindset. Life did not become easier, but it became simpler. I stopped chasing emotional highs. I focused on doing my work well, speaking honestly, acting with restraint, and accepting outcomes without resentment. Slowly, without effort, a calm settled in. not excitement, not joy in the dramatic sense, a calm that remained even on difficult days. This calm does not announce itself. It does not sparkle. It feels almost ordinary, but it is powerful. It allows you to sit with yourself without distraction. It allows silence without discomfort. It allows loss without collapse. And from this calm, something unexpected grows. A quiet appreciation for life as it is, not as you wish it to be. Happiness, when it appears in this way, is no longer chaste. It arrives as a byproduct, brief sometimes, gentle often, but no longer feared when it leaves. The Stoics never promised a life without pain. They promised a life without unnecessary suffering, and that difference changes everything. There is a subtle moment most people never notice, the moment they realize they are tired, not from effort, but from wanting life to feel different, wanting themselves to feel lighter, wanting happiness to stay longer than it ever does. I remember sitting quietly one evening, no distractions, no noise, and feeling the full weight of that wanting. It was not loud. It was dull, persistent, and draining. And in that stillness, I finally understood something the Stoics had been trying to teach for centuries. Desire, when left unexamined, becomes a source of quiet misery. The Stoics did not seek to eliminate desire entirely. They were not numb or detached from life. What they sought was discipline of desire. They asked a simple but difficult question: is this desire aligned with reality? Because reality does not bend to our wishes. Time passes, bodies age, people leave, plans collapse. When our happiness depends on reality behaving differently than it does, we live in constant friction with life itself. I used to believe that if I cared less, life would feel empty. The opposite turned out to be true. When I stopped demanding certain outcomes, success, recognition, ease, I felt lighter. Not because I had given up, but because I had stopped arguing with what was already happening. The Stoics called this agreement with nature not passive resignation, but intelligent acceptance. You do your part fully, then you release the rest. Most suffering does not come from events. It comes from the story we attach to them. A delay becomes an insult. A loss becomes injustice. A quiet period becomes failure. The Stoics trained themselves to interrupt these stories. They reminded themselves that events are neutral. It is judgment that adds weight. When you remove unnecessary judgment, life becomes more spacious. I began practicing this in small ways. When plans changed, I noted the irritation, but did not feed it. When praise did not come, I acknowledged the disappointment, but did not chase validation. Slowly, the emotional storms weakened, not because life improved, but because I stopped escalating every moment into a verdict about my worth. The Stoics knew this well. Peace is not found by controlling life, but by governing the mind. There is a freedom that emerges when you no longer measure your days by how happy they felt. You begin to measure them by how honestly you lived. Did I act with integrity? Did I respond with patience? Did I do what was mine to do, regardless of outcome? These questions anchor you. They do not fluctuate with mood. They do not depend on external approval. Marcus Aurelius wrote his reflections not during peace, but during war, illness, and political pressure. His calm was not the absence of hardship. It was the presence of perspective. He reminded himself daily that life is temporary and that this impermanence is not a curse, but a clarifier. When you truly accept that everything passes, you stop clinging. And when you stop clinging, fear loosens its grip. I noticed something unexpected as I adopted this view. Moments became clearer. Food tasted more honest. Silence felt less threatening. Even pain, when it arrived, felt cleaner without the added layer of resistance. The Stoics did not romanticize suffering, but they refused to dramatize it. They understood that much of what exhausts us is not pain itself, but our refusal to accept its presence. Living this way does not make you passive. It makes you precise. You conserve energy. You stop wasting attention on resentment, envy, and hypothetical futures. You place your effort where it belongs, in your actions, your character, your choices, and in doing so, you begin to experience a quiet strength. This strength does not announce itself. Others may not notice it, but you feel it when life presses against you and you do not collapse. You feel it when joy visits and you enjoy it without fear of loss. You feel it when happiness leaves and you remain whole. The Stoics understood that happiness is unreliable as a foundation for life. Virtue is not, discipline is not, clarity is not. When these become your center, happiness becomes optional, not necessary for peace, but welcome when it appears. And that is the turning point. When happiness is no longer required, it stops controlling you. It becomes a guest, not a ruler. And for the first time, you are free enough to live fully, steady, grounded, and unafraid of how you feel tomorrow. There is a moment in every life when distraction stops working, not because the world becomes quieter, but because the noise no longer convinces you. I remember reaching that moment clearly. The routines were still there. The conversations, the obligations, the small pleasures carefully arranged to keep discomfort away. Yet underneath it all, something felt unresolved. The Stoics would recognize this immediately. They believed that when we constantly escape into distraction, it is not rest we are seeking. It is avoidance. Avoidance of ourselves, avoidance of reality, avoidance of the truth that life demands attention, not entertainment. We live in an age that rewards distraction. Every uncomfortable thought can be replaced instantly. Every quiet moment can be filled. But the Stoics warn that a mind constantly occupied is not a peaceful mind. It is a restless one. Seneca wrote that we are not short of time, but wasteful of it. I did not understand this until I noticed how often I postponed stillness. Silence felt unproductive, reflection felt heavy, yet the more I avoided stillness, the more fragmented I became. Stoicism teaches a different relationship with time. Time is not something to be filled, it is something to be inhabited. When you slow down enough to observe your own thoughts, patterns emerge. You begin to see how often your mind rehearses the same fears, the same regrets, the same imagined futures. The Stoics did not judge these thoughts. They examined them. They asked whether a thought was useful, truthful, or within their control. If not, they learned to let it pass without resistance. I began practicing this quietly, not dramatically, not perfectly. When my mind wandered toward worry, I noticed it. When it drifted into resentment, I acknowledged it. And instead of fighting these thoughts, I questioned them. Is this happening now? Is this within my power? Does this deserve my energy? Often, the answer was no. In those moments, something softened. The mind loosened its grip. The Stoics believed that clarity is a form of discipline. You train the mind the same way you train the body, through repetition, patience, and honesty. You do not eliminate weakness overnight. You notice it. You work with it. Over time, attention becomes steadier. You stop reacting automatically. You create a small space between impulse and response. And in that space, freedom lives. Most people believe freedom comes from doing whatever they want. The Stoics disagreed. They believe freedom comes from not being ruled by what you want. When desire dictates your actions, you are predictable, manipulable, easily disturbed. When reason guides you, you become difficult to shake. This is not rigidity. It is composure. As this discipline deepens, another realization appears. Control is far more limited than we like to admit. The Stoics were uncompromising about this. You control your choices, your judgments, your effort. You do not control outcomes, opinions, timing, or fate. Much suffering comes from confusing these two domains. We exhaust ourselves trying to manage what was never ours to manage. I noticed how often disappointment came not from failure, but from expectation. I had imagined how things should unfold. When reality disagreed, I resisted. The Stoics taught me to adjust expectations, not reality. To act fully, then release the result. This does not mean indifference. It means trust in your effort without attachment to reward. This shift changes how you experience setbacks. A delay becomes neutral information, not an insult. Criticism becomes data, not a wound. Loss becomes part of the human contract, not a personal injustice. You still feel emotion. Stoicism does not erase it, but emotion no longer governs you. It passes through instead of taking over. With this comes a quieter confidence. You no longer need constant reassurance that things are going well. You measure your days differently. Did I act with intention? Did I remain steady under pressure? Did I respond rather than react? These questions do not fluctuate with circumstance. They anchor you when life becomes unstable. The Stoics believe that tranquility is not found by arranging perfect conditions, but by cultivating inner order. When your values are clear, fewer things disturb you. When your standards are internal, fewer opinions matter. When your attention is disciplined, fewer impulses control you. Life remains uncertain, but you are no longer at war with it. I noticed that as this mindset settled in, happiness stopped being the focus. It appeared sometimes, quietly, briefly, and when it left, nothing collapsed. Peace remained, not because life was easy, but because I was no longer demanding that it be. The Stoics did not promise comfort. They promised resilience. They promised that with practice, the mind could become a place of refuge rather than conflict. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all. Not how to feel good, but how to remain grounded. Not how to avoid pain, but how to meet it without losing yourself. When you live this way, happiness is no longer something you chase or fear losing. It becomes a visitor, welcome, but not necessary. That is the strength Stoicism offers. Quiet, unremarkable to outsiders, transformative to those who practice it. A life lived with attention, restraint, and clarity. A life no longer ruled by moods, outcomes, or endless wanting. And in that steadiness, something rare emerges. A deep, enduring peace that does not depend on how the day turns out. There comes a stage on this path where silence no longer feels empty. It feels honest. At first, silence can be unsettling. It removes the familiar noise that once told us who we were and how we were doing. Without that noise, we are left with ourselves. I remember noticing this shift slowly. Moments that once demanded filling, waiting, walking, sitting alone, began to feel complete on their own. The Stoics spoke often about this state, though not as a destination, but as a consequence of practice. When the mind stops chasing stimulation, it begins to settle into clarity. This clarity does not arrive as a revelation. It grows quietly. You notice that your reactions soften, that your need to explain yourself diminishes, that the urge to control how things unfold loses its urgency. The Stoics believed this was a sign of alignment, when your inner world no longer resists reality, not because you agree with everything that happens, but because you understand what is worth resisting and what is not. Much of our earlier suffering came from confusing preference with necessity. We wanted life to unfold in certain ways and treated those wants as requirements. The Stoics trained themselves to separate the two. It is fine to prefer comfort. It is dangerous to need it. Fine to enjoy success. Dangerous to depend on it. When preference becomes necessity, peace becomes fragile. I saw how often I had mistaken comfort for stability. As long as things were smooth, I felt calm. When they were not, my calm collapsed. Stoicism exposed this weakness gently but clearly. True stability, they taught, does not rely on conditions. It relies on preparedness. You prepare the mind to meet loss, uncertainty, and change, not with dread, but with readiness. This readiness changes how you experience the present. You are no longer scanning each moment for signs of happiness or threat. You are simply present, doing what is in front of you, responding as needed, letting the rest pass. The Stoics believed that a well-governed mind does not cling to the past or rush into the future. It stays where action is possible. Now, there is relief in this. Not excitement, but relief. You stop carrying unnecessary weight. You stop rehearsing conversations that may never happen. You stop replaying mistakes that can no longer be changed. Energy returns, not because life is easier, but because it is no longer wasted on resistance. With this comes a deeper form of confidence. Not the loud confidence that seeks validation, but a quiet certainty that you can endure whatever arrives. The Stoics called this inner citadel, the part of you that remains untouched by external chaos. It is built slowly through daily choices, choosing patience over impulse, clarity over assumption, principle over comfort. This does not make you distant from life. It makes you more engaged. When fear no longer dominates your decisions, you act more honestly. You speak more directly. You commit more fully. You are less distracted by how things might turn out and more attentive to how you conduct yourself. I noticed that relationships changed as well when I no longer needed others to provide happiness. I could meet them without expectation. Appreciation replaced demand. Presence replaced performance. The Stoics understood that many conflicts arise not from cruelty, but from unmet expectations. When expectations loosen, understanding grows. Even ambition transforms under this lens. You still work. You still strive. But the tone shifts. Effort becomes an expression of character, not a plea for validation. You measure success internally by discipline, honesty, consistency. External results matter, but they no longer define you. This way of living is not dramatic. It will not impress those who equate intensity with meaning, but it sustains you. It allows you to move through good days without attachment and difficult days without despair. The Stoics believed that the highest achievement was not constant happiness, but steady virtue, a life governed by reason, guided by values, and anchored in reality. When you reach this point, you realize that happiness was never the problem. Dependence was. The moment happiness became optional, peace became possible. You can enjoy joy when it comes. You can endure hardship when it stays. Neither determines your worth. Neither dictates your direction. This is the quiet freedom Stoicism offers. Not escape from life, but participation without fear. A mind no longer pulled apart by desire and resistance. A life lived deliberately, attentively, calmly. And in that calm, you find something more reliable than happiness, an inner steadiness that remains regardless of how the world chooses to unfold. If you have stayed with this reflection until now, you may notice something subtle within yourself. Not excitement, not a surge of motivation, but a quiet recognition, a sense that the struggle you once called the pursuit of happiness was never truly about happiness at all. It was about control, about certainty, about the hope that if you could just arrange life correctly, peace would follow. The Stoics would tell you gently, peace does not follow arrangement. It follows alignment. Alignment between who you are, what you value, and how you act, regardless of how the world responds. I did not understand this when I first encountered Stoic thought. I was still searching for outcomes. I wanted reassurance that this way of living would pay off. But Stoicism is not transactional. It does not promise reward. It offers responsibility. Responsibility for your attention, for your judgments, for the way you meet each moment, whether it arrives gently or with force. The Stoics believed that the greatest freedom available to a human being is the freedom to choose their response. Everything else, success, recognition, comfort, pleasure, comes and goes. But how you respond remains yours until the end. As I slowly adopted this view, something important shifted. Life did not become easier, but it became cleaner. Fewer internal arguments, fewer resentments rehearsed in silence, fewer imagined futures stealing energy from the present. I stopped asking life to guarantee happiness and began asking myself a simpler question. Am I living in accordance with my principles today? That question is grounding. It does not depend on mood. It does not require perfect conditions. It can be answered even on difficult days, especially on difficult days. The Stoics believed that adversity is not an obstacle to virtue. It is its training ground. When things go well, anyone can feel content. When things fall apart, character is revealed. And this is where the pursuit of happiness finally dissolves. Not because happiness disappears, but because it is no longer central. It becomes one experience among many. Pleasant when it arrives, survivable when it leaves. You no longer cling to it. You no longer fear its absence. You understand that a life well lived is not measured by how good it felt, but by how truthfully it was lived. If there is one idea I hope you carry forward, it is this. You do not need to chase happiness to live well. You need clarity. You need discipline. You need the courage to accept what is outside your control and the strength to govern what is within it. This is not a dramatic philosophy. It will not make you feel extraordinary, but it will make you steady. And steadiness in a chaotic world is rare. The Stoics knew that most people spend their lives trying to escape discomfort. In doing so, they create a deeper form of suffering, fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of not being enough. Stoicism offers a different path, one where you face discomfort early, willingly, and discover that it has limits, that you are stronger than you thought, that you do not need life to be perfect in order to be at peace. This way of living asks something of you: attention, patience, practice. It is not mastered by understanding alone, but by repetition, by choosing restraint when impulse calls, by choosing honesty when convenience tempts, by choosing presence when distraction offers an easy escape. Over time, these choices compound. They shape a mind that is calm without being passive, strong without being rigid, open without being dependent. A mind that can enjoy joy fully without fear of its ending. A mind that can endure hardship without losing itself. Happiness may still visit you, often quietly, sometimes unexpectedly, but it will no longer be the ruler of your life. It will be a guest, welcome, appreciated, never demanded, and in that shift, something more durable takes its place. A deep, stable peace that does not rise and fall with circumstances. If this reflection resonated with you, if it named something you have felt but could not yet articulate, consider staying with it. Reflect on it. Test it in your own life. And if you found value here, I invite you to take a simple action. Like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and leave a comment about what part resonated most with you. Your engagement helps this message reach those who are still chasing what they do not need to chase.